Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Israel steps up its campaign in Syria as government forces withdraw from Sweden after days of sectarian bloodshed, and the UN Security Council takes notice. Russia hands over 1,000 bodies of Ukrainian soldiers as part of a stalled peace effort, whilst its forces push deeper into Ukrainian territory. And Donald Trump's handling of the Epstein controversy risks dividing his own supporters and could threaten his grip on power. Syrian government forces have completed their withdrawal from Sweda province following days of intense sectarian violence between Druze fighters and Bedouin tribes that left hundreds dead. The pullout is part of a new ceasefire deal that shifts responsibility for security to the local Druze leaders and factions. Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara addressed the nation, saying the decision was made to prevent further chaos and to preserve national unity. Here's what he had to say.
But we put the interests of the Syrians before chaos and destruction. So the best choice at this stage was to make a careful decision to protect the unity of our country and the safety of its people, based on the supreme national interest. We decided to assign some local factions and sheikhs the responsibility of maintaining security in Sweda. I stress that this decision stems from our deep awareness of the seriousness of the situation for our national unity, and to avoid the country slipping into a large-scale war.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined in studio by Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and columnist and correspondent Gemma. Thanks to you both for joining me. Michael, first to you on this. Is this a genuine move, do you think, to protect the Druze civilians, or is this political necessity that we're seeing here under the pressure of the Israeli and the local forces as well?
So I think it was a political necessity on the part of the Syrian president, but I do not think it had anything to do with the threat from the Israelis. You have to understand that, look, in Syria, it's made up of so many minorities. And I think what the president is doing is stepping away from what would have happened in the past. The Assads came into power in 1971. And a great example of the way that they ruled, in 1982, Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, coined this in his book, From Beirut to Jerusalem. He has a chapter called Hama Rules. Hama's about 50 kilometers north of Damascus. Small town, they've got these beautiful water wheels, and there was an uprising there, and the president sent in the troops, and they killed anywhere from 10 to 20,000 Syrians. That traditionally would have been the way that a Syrian president would have handled dissent. Here, what the Syrian president has done is, I think, an incredibly bold move, and it also sets the tone that he comes across very confident and a real leader, because most leaders would not feel comfortable delegating and assigning local communities to handle their own issues.
Is it a smart idea, though? Because now what we'll see is potentially, since the fall of Assad, a shift in support towards the new president, and potentially a lot of support from the minorities. It may, in fact, bump him up with all of those minorities who otherwise may not have given him support.
So I think that what has to happen now is they do have to come together. There has to be the coalition of the minorities coming together. And traditionally, one of the reasons the Assads did have success was not just because they had a strong hand, but also because they came from a minority sect themselves, from the Alawites. And that isn't out of norm for Syrians. They recognize that there are Druze, and there are Christians, and there are Sunnis, and the Shias, and there are Alawites. So the country is made up of so many different religious sects that coming together is very much a Syrian thing.
Gemma, as we'd heard, President al-Shara has now said security is in the hands of the religious elders and the local factions as well. What do we know about this? Is this sustainable as a plan?
I agree with Michael. This is a confident move, isn't it? And he's come across as very calm and very measured. So there is confidence in his plan, which I think in turn will give confidence to the people enacting it. So yeah, he said the sort of responsibility for the security in the region will be handed to religious elders and some factions based on the supreme national interest. Now, he hasn't clarified who that will be. We don't have any names yet. And we also don't know if it weights in favour of, if it's representative, you know, of the different groups, how many from each group. We don't know that at the moment. But I think it's a good thing to have local people dealing with local community problems as opposed to bringing in outsiders who perhaps don't understand the neighbourhoods, don't understand the situation. But I'm also reminded of the very famous saying, which is who watches the watchers. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if some kind of external oversight might have been, you know, appropriate in this case. But again, you don't want to inflame tensions already, both internally and externally.
And again, there's many different facets to this, but earlier I did speak to the political analyst, Hamdi Rafi, about how this would affect President Ahmed al-Shara. Take a listen to this.
It clearly boosts his standing among Syrians, because as much as Syrians are upset at what is occurring, they understand Israel has already completely destroyed Syria's air force. We have no ability to fight Israel. There's no argument about that. And no Syrian wants continued fighting. In fact, Syria has gone through extensive efforts to try to create a normalization to whatever degree that could be possible with Israel through its meetings in Baku, Azerbaijan, through Turkish mediation, through Saudi Arabia's efforts, through the United States, through Tom Barak's efforts. Syria has done everything possible to de-escalate the situation. Now, on the world stage, most of Europe and the United States back this Syrian government and understand that the only hope for stability in the region is Ahmed al-Shara and the new Syrian government. So they don't support what Israel is doing, and they now see Israel as the instigator, the belligerent, creating the violence, the political vacuum, the instability in the region.
And when I spoke to Hamdi on this earlier on, we spoke a little bit about Israel and their obviously involvement here, and there's a risk of a spread in the conflict if this ceasefire doesn't hold. Will Israel want a spread in the conflict, Michael? Is that maybe the plan?
So I'm going to say that Israel has been very confident in the narrative that they've been able to put forth for decades, which is that we are the U.S.'s strongest ally in the region. We know, however, from President Trump's visit that he is quite amenable to the Gulf states. We also know that there are a minimum of 10 U.S. military bases in Iraq. We know that the U.S. is prepared to, despite the bombing, negotiate with the Iranians. They are very good allies with Jordan and with Egypt. And what would start to crumble is the Israeli narrative that everybody's out to get us and that we are your strongest ally. We, Israel, to America, we are your strongest ally in the region. If the U.S. starts to pump in a lot of the money into Syria, which people think will happen, the sanctions, of course, have been lifted. And if the Syrian government is given a legitimate shot at surviving and thriving, you know, we know the Qataris, for instance, have signed deals to run the airports in Syria, and that's a pure business venture. The Saudis and the Qataris have agreed to pay off the Syrian government's debts. So you have so many regional players who have great relationships with the states coming together to support Syria. So why is it that Israel would continue to try to sow discontent? Because I think that their biggest objective would be to have a chaotic and a divided Syria. If Syria, to their credit, is not going to respond to any of the bombings, and of course they didn't, then that, I think, puts them in an even better position.
They didn't, but they didn't yet, which is important to say as well. Do you think they could?
Well, Tuesday night there were, I think, more than 150 targets that were hit by the Israelis. If they're not going to respond then, I can't imagine that they're going to respond at all in the future. Now, having said that, we also talked about before that maybe they don't have the capabilities. We also have to remember that the Russians were in Syria when Bashar al-Assad was still there. And the Russians, of course, are incredibly distracted right now by what's going on in Ukraine. They don't have the resources. So all of a sudden, Syria is without the Russians. They seem to be wanting to work with the Americans. The Americans are using this as an opportunity to build more bridges in the region. All of their allies want the Syrian government to succeed. There's a wonderful opportunity, not just for America to make sure that they have a friend in Syria, but it's also a great opportunity for the Syrians. The player that remains in the player that would be in the cold, though, would be the Israelis.
Gemma, before we move on from this, the US, obviously no involvement thus far. Do you think that will remain the same? The US have no business getting involved here?
Yeah, I don't think they will. I mean, obviously they've had al-Shara mentioned them in his speech. He praised the effective intervention of American, Arab and Turkish mediation, which saved the region from an unknown fate. So I actually think at the moment the rhetoric is enough without further action.
Thank you both so much, Michael and Gemma. Stay right there. We'll move on to our next story. Russia says it has returned the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers, as agreed during last month's talks in Istanbul. It's one of the very few diplomatic outcomes amid the deadlocked war. Photos posted by a Kremlin aide show body bags being lifted from trucks in what's described as a humanitarian gesture. But on the battlefield, Russia claims new gains across 3 regions and has expanded its summer offensive. That's despite US pressures for a ceasefire. Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent Dasha Cherishova, who is in Russia, for the latest developments.
Well, those swaps of the bodies of the dead soldiers is a part of the arrangement that have been reached by the negotiation teams from Russia and Ukraine during the second round of direct talks between the sides. And we understand that Moscow is ready to hand over more bodies to the Ukrainian side as a gesture of goodwill and a humanitarian one as well. And obviously the ratio that we are seeing, 1,000 bodies returned from Russia to Ukraine and 19 from Ukraine to Russia, means that the losses on the Russian side are significantly less than on the Ukrainian. And Moscow has been stressing for months now that the Ukrainian army has been losing more soldiers on the battlefield, while Russia has never disclosed the exact number of its own losses during the course of the so-called special military operation in Ukraine. And the hope in Moscow is that once the exchange of those bodies is complete, then the sides will be talking finally about the exact date for the third round of talks to be held between Moscow and Kiev. And the Kremlin has also been saying that Kiev is no rush to announce that date. So finally now the understanding in Moscow is that once this exchange is complete, they will be talking about more talks, especially now that there's been the 50-day deadline introduced by the American administration, although Russia has seemingly ignored that deadline. But obviously the hope is that talks will continue.
Donald Trump is facing growing backlash, not from the Democrats this time, but from within his own base over his shifting response to the Epstein files. In a fiery Truth Social post, he's lashed out at both political opponents and also supporters, calling them gullible for buying into what he refers to as a hoax. But the polls are showing broad public demand for transparency, and the issue really is testing the limits of Trump's influence, even amongst his most loyal allies. Michael, this really is the issue that refuses to go away for President Trump. Do you think that he thought by now that this would all have been swept under the carpet and disappeared?
I think it's a surprise to him because traditionally he's able to control the narrative when it comes to anything that he wants to either push under the carpet or something he wants to shine a light on. He is able to stand the test of time. He doesn't like something, he'll say something about the reporter, calling them nasty, or he'll say something about fake news. But in this particular case, he's losing the battle. And it's partly because it is part of the mega mythology. This particular conspiracy with Jeffrey Epstein and the client list. He has had so many people who are part of his administration who are supporting the releasing of the client list. And now he's saying, no, there's nothing to look at here.
Well, what they're actually saying is there is no client list. And this is Alan Dershowitz who said this as well, former lawyer for Jeffrey Epstein, so I guess you could say a vested interest. But no list, and that there's no current office holders on the redacted names that appeared on the previous document.
But Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, in February on Fox News said that the client list was on her desk.
However, the Justice Department has said no. So you have to now question who's telling the truth in this situation.
But
Gemma,
this is exactly what happens in a great conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it is that, but you have to take it at face value on what it is, for now at least. But Gemma, the MAGA backlash has been quite immense. He's risking quite a lot and losing a lot of support from some of the key players in here.
Yeah, and he's quite angry about it. He's already called his Republicans foolish and stupid and weaklings as well. So, yeah, he is alienating his hardcore MAGA base, but in particular, quite the fringe elements as well. So these are the people who regularly post on QAnon, on 4chan and Reddit. And these are the people who start the sort of deep, dark conspiracy theories. For example, the Pizzagate conspiracy theory with Hillary Clinton and those kind of things. Now, you might want to dismiss them as, you know, fringe lunatics or whatever, but they are incredibly influential. And the rumors that they start and the things that they want tend to go nationwide in the US. Now, we have to remember that the list, which, you know, whether it exists or not, this group believes that there's high-ranking Democratic names on the list. So that's why they want it out there. But they also are seeing that their president is not being transparent with them. And he campaigned on draining the swamp, you know, Doge, like clearing out, you know, saving money and all of this. But now his base feels betrayed because they feel that he is not being honest with them. And remember, Donald Trump raged against the elites. He was all about the elites and the cover-ups. And now it looks like he's being a member of the elite and he's covering up as well.
Do you think it's viable, Michael, that these files are released? Is it a good idea?
So I think if you want to keep, so there's the MAGA base and the split that's happening there. But now it's become more of a political Democrat versus Republican issue.
Yeah.
There seems to be bipartisan support in the House for a bill where they will come together to urge the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, one of the people who advocated for the releasing of the documents before Donald Trump was reelected, coming together to urge the Attorney General to release them. So it's no longer just the fringe group, it's now drifting into the larger MAGA base, and it's also now something that the Democratic Party recognizes this is going to create a rift within the Republican Party, and we need to exploit it.
And we could see Pam going to testify in Congress as well, which we've heard that in the last 24 hours, which would potentially see the truth behind the actual files and if they exist. Is that really the solution? Do we just need to get the files out there? Do we need the transparency? Because Trump has said many, many times, this issue needs to go away, and quick.
Even if it was released tomorrow, people are still not going to believe that it's the right one. You know, you're not going to be able to win here. It will be, these have been redacted, these have been altered in some way. So irrespective of whether it's released or not, some people are still not going to believe that it is. I think it's at this point, because it's dragged on so long, no one's going to win. You can't win this situation.
It's also, it was just last month, it seems like it was much longer than that, but it was just last month that Elon Musk tweeted that the reason that the Epstein files will not be released is because Donald Trump is on that list.
Did he do enough to distance himself? I mean, because we know in 2007, when the first sniff of this came about, that there was a ban put in place on Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. Is that doing enough? And then he tried to distance himself at that point. We know that they were very close at one stage. We have the videos, we've seen the footage. But did he really distance himself from that situation?
So if I were to act as though I'm a part of the MAGA base, I would say, well, then release the documents and let everybody see for themselves. That is what Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, talked about it before she was part of the administration. Kash Patel, who's the FBI director, talked about it. Dan Bongini, who is the deputy FBI director. J.D. Vance, when he was Donald Trump's running mate during the election. All of these people have said, release the files. This week in Tampa, you had Megyn Kelly, former Fox News host. You had Tucker Carlson. All of them talking about, please release the files. So if Donald Trump wants it to go away, that doesn't seem to be happening. Going on Truth Social, asking his base to ignore it, that doesn't seem to be working. He's running out of options. At a certain point, either you're going to have to start letting people go as though they're the sacrificial lamb, or you might have to release something that you think is pointless, but at least it would then give the base something to focus on.
The Justice Department are saying the redacted names that are on there are mainly in to protect victims' identities, which may be true. So even if we do get a full release on this list, the victims' names may be removed, but also people who are on this so-called list, whatever they may be, may also not be there. It's a PR nightmare for the Trump administration. What do you think he will do next, Gemma?
Well, do you know what's it being a PR nightmare? He ran on a platform of this. His campaign was based, he said time and time again, we are going to release these files. Basically, vote for me and I'm going to release these files, the John F. Kennedy files, the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination
the UFO files.
Yeah, he campaigned on this. So I understand this sort of sense of betrayal. Like, sure, you know, oh, you made these promises and they haven't been kept. Do I think he'll release them? I'm not sure. I think he might hope that what's all going on in the rest of the world, and you know, USA is so involved in lots of different things at the moment, that it might just go away. I think that's what he's hoping for.
Well, I think it's going to be a progressive story as well, but thank you both so much, Michael and Gemma. Let's move to our next story. In South Korea, at least 4 people have died and more than 1,000 were evacuated after parts of the country were hit by the heaviest rain seen since records began. Landslide alerts were also raised to the highest level for several regions, and hundreds of schools were shut. Patrick Falk has this report.
Well, the South Chungcheong region to the south of the capital, Seoul, was hardest hit by the torrential rain. Reports say the area has seen downpours measuring more than 400 millimeters since Wednesday. According to weather agencies, some of the levels of rainfall haven't been seen in more than 100 years. The extreme conditions are wreaking havoc across different parts of the country. Emergency personnel were out clearing highways that became blocked because of fallen trees. There have been widespread reports also of people struggling to clean up and of the damage it's caused to people's homes and many businesses as well. The reports also saying among the dead was a man who drowned in his submerged car after telling his wife on the phone that his vehicle was being swept away by floods. Rescue personnel are said to have discovered the victim in his 50s and then declared him dead at a medical center. Another driver was killed after a roadside wall collapsed in Osan City. The 10-meter high wall collapsed and trapped one car while partially burying another, according to local fire services. South Korea is regularly hit by heavy rains and flooding during the summer monsoon period, but it is typically well prepared. Some reports have raised questions about the adequacy of flood prevention measures. In the same month last year, parts of the country were also hit by intense downpours. At the time, authorities said something like that only occurred every 200 years. Then previously in 2023, at least 40 people died after a week of heavy rainfall. Then President Yoon Suk-yeol said at the time that these sorts of extreme weather conditions were becoming the norm and that South Korea really couldn't afford not to take measures. In 2022, the country earmarked 2 trillion won, or about $1.4 billion US dollars, for disaster prevention.
China's Pop Mart is set to see its profits soar, with earnings expected to jump more than threefold in the first half of this year. Why? Well, the company is famous for its collectible Labubu dolls that are sold in mystery blind boxes. They've seen a massive explosion globally in demand, especially in the US. There's been celebrity endorsements, there's been partnerships, and even big brands who've helped fuel the resale market, where some dolls are selling for hundreds of dollars. But how did these dolls, seemingly out of nowhere, take the world by storm? Well, to discuss this highbrow story, Gemma and Michael. Gemma, first of all, to you, I mean, it is a craze. It seems to have gotten a bit out of hand. Can you see the appeal with Labubus?
There is one in my house. I feel that I should disclose that before we start.
Did you buy it?
No, it's my youngest child. So, yeah, it's not mine. It's not hanging off my bag. So, do I see the appeal of it? No, but I'm cool with that. That's okay. I do enjoy a cultural craze. I absolutely love watching TikToks about it. I love seeing headlines about it. I love seeing how crazy it can get, because I miss the Stanley Cup, craziness that was...
It was short-lived.
It was short-lived, but it was so much fun. And I think it's very easy to kind of look at a cultural craze, especially in the social media era, and be like, oh, we didn't do that. We had none of that back in our day. But we did. It just wasn't on social media because we didn't have it then. I'm thinking My Little Pony. I'm thinking Garbage Pail Kid cards and Cabbage Patch Kids. I'm thinking Swatch watches. Everyone had to have a Swatch watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to be honest, at my school growing up, if you weren't wearing certain trainers, you were getting beaten up in the playground. So there has always been cultural cachet around having the thing of the moment.
Michael, I gotta ask, would you pay hundreds of dollars for one of these Labubus?
No, I would not.
If you got one for free, would you take it?
I would not.
Well, that's a pity, because we've actually got one here, which we thought we'd bring in, because these are being sold in blind boxes. So just to explain a bit about how this actually works. What you get is the blind... Michael, this is yours to take with you. What you've got is this Labubu doll, and they are sold in a blind box. So what you have to then do is open it up. Whatever is inside matches the side of the box, and whatever it may be, it could be something very valuable or just one of the bog standard basics. Michael, I think we'd enjoy if you could actually unwrap this one for us, because we don't know if this one's going to be worth a fortune or not. So we'll actually give that one over to you. It is.
I don't know that this is in my contract.
I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's in your best interest.
You're hiding your joy. Come on.
Just be careful of the packaging, because that's what makes them more valuable. So what we're hearing from international sources on these is when they sell online, if they're in pristine condition and they're in their original packaging, they're selling for thousands of dollars. Can be the actual amount that people are spending on these. Some of them are selling for a whopping $13,000, which is a almost life-size version of a Labubu at about 3 foot tall. So there is huge demand for these. Now you can see that this...
another inside, okay.
Yeah. So this is, obviously, Gemma, you didn't do the unboxing on your own Labubu doll.
No.
Well, this is one of the things that's become quite popular because they're blind. It is the unboxing videos have become incredibly popular. Now I'm going to open this.
I can tell you if it's the one that's the secret one that's worth a lot of money.
And I don't know.
There's going to be a riot in the studio. Yeah, I'm going to be reaching over. The suspense is killing me.
So I think it's safe to say, Michael, what you've got is the sea salt coconut Labubu. Absolutely beautiful.
How much is it worth?
This is your bog standard basic. These ones retail, the standard selling price on these should be $10.
Okay.
Retailers are selling these for up to $100 in the store. It's got a 360 movable head as well, just in case you wondered. They are likening this to gambling, Michael, and that's because of the idea that you are opening and spending a lot of money on these. You've got no idea what's inside the box. You may be getting something very expensive, and you may be getting something that is worth just $10. So it's a concern if it is likened to gambling.
But it's something that consumers have been dealing with for generations. When I was younger, I collected hockey cards and baseball cards. And baseball cards have been around for 100 years. And some of the most expensive from some of the earliest ones, the Ty Cobb one, I think has gone for $3 or $4 million. But when you buy the hockey cards or the baseball cards, at least in North America, it's blind. You're going in not knowing if in this package I'm going to get the 3 or 4 collectibles that I know I want. The Mickey Mantle card when it was, of course, in the 50s when he was just a rookie starting out. This is the way that consumerism works, especially when it comes to collectibles. And I think that, much like when people are on social media and they're on Instagram or TikTok, it's not the videos themselves that give you the dopamine hit. It's the anticipation of what's going to come next. And so this is pure, unadulterated, 100% consumerism at its finest, because they've created something that people want, and they want it so badly that they're willing to purchase it without knowing what it is going to be in the box.
Now, I will say, and we mentioned this, you said Cabbage Patch Kids, Tamagotchis, fidget spinners. Every generation has had their own thing that's been to be obsessed about, but the difference has been the cost factor. We haven't seen fidget spinners probably went up by an astronomical amount for something that was valued at less than $1 and was selling for a crazy amount of money. But before that, Tamagotchis, Furbies, Cabbage Patch Kids, there was a recommended retail price. Retailers stuck to that, and we didn't see product inflation on that. And that's where we're seeing companies like Pop Mart make so much money. So is this the beginning of the new trend now, Gemma? Do you think this is what's going to happen? Every time something's in high demand, you can sell it for name your price?
I think this is just the start. Obviously, oh my gosh, hi. I think this is just the start. You know, once companies see that this is selling, that people are going crazy for it, we are going to see more and more. We have it with Pokemon cards. I've got tons of Pokemon cards in my house. The thrill is in, what am I going to get? What am I going to get when I open this? And it is quite exciting. So, yeah, it's sort of harmless fun until they come to life.
We mentioned a bit about conspiracy theories earlier, and we mentioned a bit about it when we were talking about the Epstein files, but there is a lot of conspiracy theories about these particular dolls and how they may not be all that they're cracked up to be. And again, a lot of it is it's just, I should point out, speculation online, that they may be a bit untoward. And now looking at them, I can kind of see where that may have circulated from in the first place.
When you say not all that it's cracked up to, what is it supposed to be other than this?
Well, I don't know, but what it's saying online is that these things are harbouring bad omens. So I don't know if you believe that or not, but you may take it home with you. I'm absolutely fine with that.
Look, here we go.
This is really not how I envisaged Thursday evening, to be honest with you guys.
And look at it, a little keychain. I can put it on, it can become my keychain.
Yeah, absolutely. On your man bag attaché case. And finally, we've reached the point in the show where both Gemma and Michael have brought stories to the table, quirky stories from the day. Gemma, we'll start off with you first. Yours is about a crowd cam footage from probably what is arguably the biggest tour of live music that we've ever seen.
Yes, so Coldplay, a Coldplay concert in Boston yesterday. So Chris Martin, the crowd cam is picking out people in the crowd, obviously, and you're supposed to wave or, do something quite fun. Well, the camera landed on this couple and they immediately ducked and started hiding their faces. Now, obviously, their reaction has sparked a lot of theories online that perhaps they weren't supposed to be at this concert together. And Chris Martin, bless him, doing great work, literally said to the whole crowd, either they're having an affair or they're very shy. Now, that was catnip to the internet, who immediately swung into action. They have found out who the guy is, which company he owns. They found out who the woman is, investigating on LinkedIn and cross-referencing with social media. And now we're all waiting with bated breath to find out if this seemingly married man who wasn't there with his wife, we're going to see what happens. It's basically Dynasty come to life.
It really is. And again, should point out, I should say, speculatively speaking.
Allegedly.
He is the CEO of a company, which I will not name, and she is the head of HR, recently promoted to that position. So perhaps this was a celebratory day out to congratulate her on her new role, and her CEO had taken her out, and we may be jumping the gun on a situation like that. Michael, are we maybe just getting a bit too ahead of ourselves here?
I like that you're going into PR mode. Very nice.
As CEO, would you hug your HR, your head of HR?
So a fist bump is about as much as I'm going to do with anyone.
I mean, it was a fist bump, but it was at hip height. So I guess
a hugging fist bump.
But it's certainly one, and it does indicate, once again, social media is a wonderful thing when used in the right way, but can also be taken to cause the downfall and detriment of many people. And I think this is just an example of that. But then again,
we await with bated breath for the next instalment.
Now, I will say, though, however, on this, and Chris Martin is not to blame for this, it's not actually Chris Martin's fault, because he was the one who did say initially that they may be having an affair, and that led to the speculation. But now that people have done the research, so it's the internet sleuths that are to blame for this, and not Chris Martin, because I'd hate to see his name and reputation tarnished.
But then the question becomes, if you are the man or the woman, how do you respond? Do you hire an agency and do you sort of own it and go out there? Or is it where you archive all your social media accounts and you try and hope that you live in a part of town that is not going to get a lot of attention, and you just hope maybe it goes away?
I mean, any one of us could become internet famous at any time, right? If you're caught at the wrong moment, if, you're in a situation. So it is quite, you have to kind of be looking over your shoulder.
Well, look, you do if you're doing something that's wrong. And I think this is where the issue, I think we've somewhat moved this into trying to normalise and say, well, the poor couple who are having an affair have had their privacy breached. At the same time, we can travel nowhere without being caught on CCTV or in the back of somebody's camera or picture. And I think the issue here really needs to be if you're doing dirty dishes, please don't do them in public. And I think that's probably where the real story is in here, Gemma, no?
Yeah, I just think, oh yeah, for me, it's just very suspicious.
Yes.
The way they were standing, the way they immediately ducked for cover. You don't do that if you're there with your other half and you're having.
But I also wonder, because there was so much attention paid to them, and because this happened in the States, a very litigious society, I wonder if there will be a lawsuit pending as a result of this.
Well, I don't know who you're going to take, Chris Martin, because he's made enough money from this Music at the Spheres World Tour. He certainly could afford to drop $1 million or $2 million to cover this up.
But the crowd cam is supposed to be fun, right? So would that be the end of crowd cams then? If so you don't want to accidentally pick up on
But with
someone?
some crowd cams in the past, you've seen people where obviously this is going to be their last date, because when the camera is on them, the last thing they want to do is interact in a friendly way. I do think that, I don't know that you necessarily purchase a ticket and then sign away all your privacy.
Be that as it may, and as you said, there's been some wonderful moments where we've seen engagements take place.
Yeah.
And some really magical moments. And that's mainly what the Music of the Spheres World Tour has tried to encapsulate, has been that everyone comes together as one. And I think the last thing Chris Martin would have done, and although I've always been a big critic of Chris Martin, would have been to expose somebody and to make them feel awkward in that situation.
But he might have hit the nail on the head with his comments. So how innocent is he? Or maybe he just thought it was so out of the realm of possibilities that I could say this because there's no way this is applicable to this couple.
And I'm a rock star, I can get away with saying whatever I like.
Absolutely, but well, there may be that, but he may also have stumbled upon something. That couple, he may be married, but they may have had a conscious uncoupling, which Chris Martin is a very firm believer in as well, because now twice he's had his very own conscious uncoupling, so I think that could have been what was going on. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, it's safe to say. Michael, your story is about an auction. We spoke about this earlier during the week as well. Now, there's been a surprise twist in the auction from the Mars piece of rock, first of all.
So Sotheby's was holding an auction today, and they had, the one that we spoke about before was a piece of Mars that had been blown off in an asteroid strike. And that piece of Mars represented 7% of all Martian material on Earth. And it sold for $5 million. But what stole the show at this Sotheby's auction was a dinosaur skeleton. Now, this was a Cerosaurus, which is essentially a mini T-Rex.
T-Rex, yeah.
So it'll go 6 feet high and about 11 feet long. And pre-auction estimates put this at anywhere from $2 to $4 or $5 million. As soon as it started, the auction, it started at $6 million, and over the course of the next 6 minutes, it hit $30 million.
Wow.
And so the final auction was $26 million, but with fees and costs brought it up to $30.5 million. And what's amazing, it was almost out of a movie, because in 6 minutes, you were getting increments of $500,000 bids that then turned into $1 million increments. And this dinosaur, which the skeleton comes from the Jurassic period, which I think we can all relate to, is, well, that would put it about 150 million years old.
But not a major dinosaur. I mean, this is not a Diplodocus, this is not a Tyrannosaurus Rex, it's not a Triceratops, this is something, a Cerosaurus I've never heard of before. So would this be an indicator that a well-known dinosaur fossil would go for a whole lot more, I guess?
Well, I think what makes this one special is that it's a complete skeleton. And it was discovered in 1996, I believe, in Wyoming. And it took years to put it all together again. And I think to be able to own something that has been around for 150 million years, for some people who are absolutely fascinated by dinosaurs and the Jurassic period, and maybe even the Jurassic movies, I don't think that it's something that they could pass up.
Now, we don't know where it's going to be displayed yet because we don't know who bought it, but it seems like a lot of cash to splash on a dinosaur. You'd hope that it goes into the public interest. Gemma, do you want to go and see a dinosaur of this caliber?
I do enjoy dinosaurs, like, definitely. I would definitely, I think it should be put out there. You know, I'm not a big fan when things like this, which everyone is so interested in, are then secreted away in a vault somewhere or kept in a private home. I really just think it would be great if whoever's bought it will donate it to a museum so that everyone can enjoy it.
Now, the Martian rock that you mentioned as well, Quite a bit more was achieved on that price. Initially, you'd said, was it 2 to 3 million was the expected price?
2 to 4, and it went for 5.
So still it's still a lot of cash. People are dropping a lot of cash in Sotheby's.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that the auction house does a wonderful job of evaluating what is the piece, but also what is the market. You know, it's easy when you have a Steve McQueen watch, or recently they had a Paul Newman Daytona Rolex that was sold. Those ones seem to be a little bit more obvious, obviously popular. But I think it's just credit to the auction house recognizing and doing their research that this is something that's going to sell and it's going to exceed expectations.
They need to sell more of these items, and time will tell if they do. And apparently Sotheby's next week have got another auction that has taken place for a dinosaur that's been discovered that's a blind dinosaur, which they're saying is, do you think he saw us? And that is where we will leave it for today. Thank you to both of our guests, to Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and to columnist and correspondent Gemma White. Thank you both very much. Once again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and as always, you can follow us on X. Goodbye.